Hey, everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm Pastor Mike Drotis, Bible teacher and preacher, and you've tuned into my YouTube channel, Solving the Prophetic Puzzle. Today, we're going to look at something that I find very, very interesting, biblical timelines. I believe there are biblical timelines encoded in the Bible that God placed there in the Bible. They're hidden in plain sight. We see them in various stories, in various accounts, in various parables, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. They show that mankind has a timeline of 6,000 years. After the 6,000 years is up, Jesus then has 1,000 years on this earth as that we call the millennial reign of Christ. We see this timeline all throughout the Bible. Now, of course, our main text will be 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. We know this verse, but it's good to read it anyway. 2 Peter 3, 8. But beloved, do not forget this one thing. I like that. He's saying, don't forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years. And 1,000 years is as one day. The companion verse to that would be in Psalm chapter 90, verse 4. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, like the watch in the night. We see that expression, one day equals 1,000 years. Then in Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10, we read, declaring the end from the beginning. So we see that Isaiah is saying that God declares the end from the beginning. So let's go to the very beginning of the whole thing, the book of Genesis, where God created the earth in 6 days. God created the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested, which we refer to as the Sabbath. I believe that this is a timeline for humanity. One day equals 1,000 years. Now, this is not a new doctrine. People have been teaching this for a long time. The early church fathers taught it. The Jewish scribes taught it. Christian teachers today teach it. Some of the things that I got in this very lesson, I heard from another teacher named Michael Snyder, and I appreciate that. He really showed me some things about these timelines, and I want to make sure that he gets credit. But as I received from him, God gave me more. That's the way revelation knowledge comes. When you get something, God begins to build on it. And so we are looking at these biblical timelines. The first one is found in the book of Genesis on the day of creation, or the week of creation. Now, isn't it interesting when we study history, it's really his story, God's story. And God gives an account of the creation in Genesis chapter 1. Each major event that happened on a particular day coincides with the 1,000-year period. 1,000 years equals one day for 6,000 years. So let's look at what happened on day 1 through 6 and see if it corresponds with that millennial at that time. Day 1, we read that God created the separation of light and darkness was on day 1. What happened in the first 1,000 years of mankind? Well, mankind was separated from God. Man fell. Light and darkness came onto the earth. Man's fellowship with God was broken. Day 2, God created the waters. The waters were divided, and dry land appeared. What happened in the second millennial, or the second 1,000 years of human history? The biggest event that we note was Noah's flood. The entire earth was flooded. Everything was destroyed except Noah and his family, as they found safety in the ark. Day 3, God created the plants and the seeds. If you see that, seeds is mentioned several times. What happened in the third millennium of creation, of human history? Abraham's seed was introduced to the earth. Abraham, the father of faith, was introduced onto the scene in the third millennium. And seed, if you read the account in Genesis, the word seed is mentioned many, many times. Seed is also mentioned for the word of God. Remember the parable of the sower? So seed is mentioned on the day 3. And that was when the Torah, the first beginning of the Bible, was written. Day 4, this is interesting. On day 4, God created the sun and the moon. Isn't that interesting that God waited to day 4 to create the sun and the moon and the stars? He did that after he created the plants. That's fascinating. People go, why did God do that? Because this timeline is prophetic. This is prophecy being unfolded. God is telling us the history, his story for humanity. And in the 4th millennium, the sun was created. The Son of God came. The Son of God was born. He was born of a virgin. He grew up. He was crucified. He was died. He was buried. And he ascended, all during the 4th day or the 4th millennium, the 4,000 years of human history. It's prophetic. What happened on the 5th day? The 5th day is very interesting. The 5th day is the time period right after Jesus died. It's the beginning of the church age. It's also known as the last days. Peter said, this is that spoken of by the prophet Joel, that in the last days, we're talking about the 5th day and the 6th day, or the 5th millennial and the 6th millennial. We are in the 6th millennial now, but let's look at day 5. Day 5, there is a focus on the birds and the fish. They were created, the birds and the fish. What happened during the 5th millennial? The disciples began to become fishers of men. Remember, Jesus told them, you will become fishers of men. And the gospel was spreading all over the world, just like God told the birds and the fish, populate, go all over the world. So too, during the 5th day, did the gospel begin to spread as the disciples became fishers of men. Also, interesting, you have Peter's vision in Acts chapter 10. Remember Peter's vision? He was on top of a house, and it was lunchtime. And as he was waiting, he fell into a trance, and he saw heaven opened, and he saw an object, a great sheet bound at 4 corners descending. And on the 4 sheets there were animals of the earth. There were wild beasts, there were creeping things, there were birds of the air. And a voice said, rise and kill and eat, Peter. Peter said, they're not clean. God said, don't call. What God has called is clean. You must not call common. And so what he was telling Peter was, you need to go to the Gentiles. It's time to reach the Gentiles. So that all happened on day 5, or the 5th millennial of human history. Day 6, we're living in day 6 right now. What happened on day 6? God created 2 things. He created the beast of the earth. If you read it in Genesis account, he created the beast. And he also created man. What happened in the millennial that we're living in right now, as we're coming to a close of this 1,000-year time period? Mankind's population spread all over the world. God told humanity, he told Adam, be fruitful and multiply. But he also created the beast. And in this millennial, this 1,000 years of human history, as we're coming to a close, we will be introduced to the mark of the beast. We will be introduced to the guy that is called the beast, the Antichrist. He comes on the scene near the end of this millennial. And that was the same time on day 6 that the beasts were created. Then day 7, we're not there yet, but we're getting very, very close. Day 7 was the Sabbath. What happens in the 7th millennial? There's 7,000 years of human history. Messiah comes back. Messiah comes back and rules and reigns. So there you have it. The 7,000-year time period of human history. There's more. In the temple, the menorah, the candlestick that was in the Temple Institute recreated this. And if you had a picture of this, I wish I had a picture, but it's 7 candles. 7 candles represent the timeline for humanity. It doesn't matter if you go right to left or left to right. In the middle is what they call the great light, the 4th candle. Jesus Christ came to earth during the 4th millennium, the 4,000-year time period of human history. And he is the great light. All the other candles, you have the 1st candle that's connected to the 7th, the 2nd candle's connected to the 6th, and the 3rd candle's connected to the 5th. All of those have meaning as well because it's prophecy. It's Bible prophecy. It's a timeline, and God's telling us a man's humanity. The 1st candle is connected to the 6th candle, or the 7th candle, sorry. The 1st candle is connected to the 7th candle. In the first day, paradise was lost, but in the 7th millennial, or the 7,000 years, paradise is gained. The 2nd candle is connected to the 6th candle. In the 2nd millennium, Noah's flood. Remember, I already mentioned that. In the 6th millennium, the time we're living at now, is the tribulation. 2 great cataclysmic events occurred. They're similar there. The 3rd candle is connected to the 5th candle. In the 3rd millennium, the 3rd 1,000 years, we have the first books of the Bible being written, the Torah. In the 5th day, or the 5,000th year of man's humanity, we have the last books of the Bible written, the New Testament. So there you have a 7,000-year time frame right there as well. What about this one? Let's look at another one. 1 Kings. It's all through the Bible. If you see it, you'll begin to realize, oh yeah, I know what you mean. In 1 Kings chapter 10, we know about Solomon. He was the greatest king. He was the smartest man in the entire earth. He was the greatest king. He built the temple. And he also built his house and other structures. And in 1 Kings chapter 10, we have an account of Solomon's throne. Look at verse 18. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps. At the top of the throne was round. At the back there was an armrest on either side of the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the armrest. 12 lions stood there, one on each side of the 6 steps. Nothing like this had ever been made for any other kingdom. This was Solomon's throne. It was 6 steps with lions on both ends. 6 steps leading up to the very throne. That's the 6,000-year time period of man leading then to the millennial reign of Christ. Okay, let's look at another one. There's 2 places you could look at. Matthew 17 or Mark chapter 9. To keep things short and moving, we'll look at Matthew 17 verses 1 through 3. In Matthew 17, we read about the transfiguration. Now, isn't it interesting that all throughout the Bible, there is no number written without a reason and a purpose, and every number has a reason and a purpose. And in Matthew chapter 17, we read about the transfiguration. But let's look at what happened. The very first words, now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up on a high mountain. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with them. Oh my! Isn't it interesting? Not by coincidence that after 6 days, Jesus was transfigured. 6 days of human history. On the 7th day, or after 6 days, Jesus Christ is transfigured and comes back to this earth as King of Kings and Lord of Lords and rules and reigns on this earth. It's all through the Bible. God has shown us a timeline. And this is interesting because if we can understand this timeline, we can know things about when the Lord is going to return and set up his millennial reign. And I won't tell you when today, but I can tell you this. We are getting very, very close to that. That's for the next lesson. Let's look at another one. One more as we come to a close. Let's look at Jesus on the cross. Jesus hung on the cross for 6 hours. In Matthew chapter 27, we read about the account that Matthew gave where Jesus was hanging on the cross. And it says in verse 45, now from the 6th hour into the 9th hour, there was darkness over all the land. And some of you may be saying, wait a minute, Pastor Mike, you said Christ was on the cross for 6 hours. If my math adds up, 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness, that's only 3 hours. You missed it there, Pastor Mike. Hold it. Let's look at Mark chapter 15. This is the amazing thing about the Bible. You have to read the Bible to understand the Bible. In Mark chapter 15, Mark's recording the crucifixion, and in verse 21, then they compelled a certain man, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross. And then in verse 23, it says they crucified Jesus, and they gave him wine mingled with myrrh to drink, but he did not drink it. And when they crucified him, they divided his garments, casting lots for them to determine what man should take. Now it was the 3rd hour. Mark tells us that the crucifixion started at the 3rd hour. Matthew's just telling us at the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness over the land. At the 9th hour, Jesus gave up the ghost. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then he commended his spirit unto the Father. Christ was on the cross for 6 hours. Human history, man's timeline is 6,000 years. Just as Christ died and then 3 days later was resurrected, so too after the 6,000 year period will be the 7th day, the 7,000 years, or the 7th 1,000 year time period where Jesus rules and reigns on this earth that we call the millennial reign of Christ. Where are we now on this timeline? We are at the end of the 6th day. We are very, very close to the 7th day. We are very, very close to Jesus coming back. The next lesson that I teach, I'm going to tell you or teach about how close we really are to the end of man's time allotted to him on the earth, according to God's timeline. Hey, thanks for watching. If you haven't liked or subscribed yet, please do. And as I like to say all the time, keep looking up. Jesus Christ is coming back soon. God bless you.